I want you to do something with me right now. I want you to sit in complete silence for 41 minutes. No phone, no TV, no music, just silence. Because that is exactly how long it was. 41 minutes between the moment Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera went dark at 1:47 a.m. and the moment her pacemaker transmitted its final signal at 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. 41 minutes, in which an 84-year-old great-grandmother who could not walk 50 yards by herself, a woman who needed daily heart medication to survive, who had a pacemaker monitoring every single beat of her heart, disappeared completely from every digital record that should have been protecting her. No footage, no signal, no trace. And buried inside those 41 minutes is something that a former Washington, D.C. homicide detective said immediately raised the biggest red flag of the entire investigation. Not the blood on the porch, not the DNA, not the ransom notes, the time. Because according to this detective, 41 minutes is far too long for a burglary, far too long for a panicked abduction, and exactly long enough for something far more deliberate, far more controlled, and far more terrifying than anyone has yet said out loud on camera. That device, implanted inside an 84-year-old woman's chest, has 6 to 7 years of battery life remaining. It is still generating cardiac data. It is still transmitting a Bluetooth signal into the world. And the FBI has deployed a technology so new, so experimental, so cutting edge that the prototype was still being built when investigators first asked for it. A device that flies on drones, scans 1,000 feet in every direction, and is specifically programmed to lock onto the unique digital fingerprint of Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, and nobody else's. The question is not whether her pacemaker is still out there. The question is whether the FBI's drones can find it before it is too late. And buried inside the answer to that question is a detail that changes everything about how we understand those 41 silent minutes on the night of February 1st. To understand why the 41-minute gap is so much more significant than mainstream media has explained, you need to understand something that almost nobody is talking about: the 3 technological systems that were supposed to be protecting Nancy Guthrie that night, and the specific, deliberate way each one was neutralized. System 1, the Nest doorbell camera. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera went dark, not because it malfunctioned, not because the battery died, because something or someone severed its connection, whether through a Wi-Fi jammer, physical tampering, or network disruption remains under investigation. What investigators recovered from the device's onboard flash memory, 6 photographs and 3 video clips of a masked, armed figure, is now the most studied footage in American law enforcement. System 2, the motion detection software. At 2:12 a.m., exactly 25 minutes after the camera disconnected, the home surveillance software detected motion outside Nancy's front door. No video, no footage, just a timestamp confirming that something moved. Former Washington, D.C. homicide detective Ted Williams said this detail is the one that keeps him awake. A standard home burglary takes 8 to 12 minutes. A grab-and-go abduction takes even less. So what was happening inside that house for 25 full minutes before even the motion detector fired? Williams was explicit. That leads me to believe that they were well aware of the cameras, and those cameras were inoperable in that home. I think that the individuals involved in Nancy going missing definitely knew that they didn't have to worry about law enforcement immediately rushing there. They were not in a hurry. They had a schedule, and they kept to it. System 3. The pacemaker. And here is where this story goes somewhere that no other channel has gone. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, a half-dollar-sized battery-powered implant, is not just a heart monitoring device. In 2026, it is a data-generating, signal-transmitting, time-stamped witness to everything that happened to her body on the night of February 1st. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker app disconnected from her iPhone. But here's the critical distinction that Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed, and almost nobody reported properly. The pacemaker itself never stopped. The device continued functioning normally inside Nancy's body. What stopped was the remote remote transmission to the monitoring clinic, meaning either the phone lost power, was turned off, moved out of Bluetooth range, or was deliberately disconnected by someone who knew that Pacemaker app was broadcasting Nancy's location and cardiac data to the outside world. First question for you right now. Someone or something disconnected Nancy's pacemaker at exactly 2:28 a.m. Do you think that was deliberate? Someone who knew about the app and intentionally stopped it? Or a coincidence? Drop your answer in the comments. February 1st, March 11th, 2026, Tucson, Arizona, and the skies above. Here is the complete 41-minute timeline and the explosive new details buried inside each timestamp that mainstream media has barely scratched. At 1:47 a.m., the camera goes dark. The Nest doorbell camera disconnects. The neighborhood internet begins experiencing widespread outages that multiple residents will later confirm to FBI agents going door to door. The masked suspect, already captured in the recovered footage, has neutralized the camera directly, or the Wi-Fi disruption has done it for him. Either way, the result is the same. Nancy Guthrie's home has just gone completely dark to the outside world. Between 1:47 a.m. and 2:12 a.m., 25 minutes of unrecorded activity. This is the window. This is where it happened. And this is the window that Ted Williams said is uncharacteristic of every category of crime except one, a planned, controlled, deliberate operation by people who were intimately familiar with that home, that security system, and that woman's daily routine. 25 minutes, inside a house with no cameras, no signals, and an 84-year-old woman who could not walk 50 yards by herself. 2:28 a.m., motion detected. The surveillance software fires. Something moved outside Nancy's front door. No video, no footage, just a timestamp confirming that something moved. Former Washington, D.C. homicide detective Ted Williams said this detail is the one that keeps him awake. A standard home burglary takes 8 to 12 minutes. A grab-and-go abduction takes even less. So what was happening inside that house for 25 full minutes before even the motion detector fired? Williams was explicit. That leads me to believe that they were well aware of the cameras, and those cameras were inoperable in that home. I think that the individuals involved in Nancy going missing definitely knew that they didn't have to worry about law enforcement immediately rushing there. They were not in a hurry. They had a schedule, and they kept to it. Now here is where this story goes somewhere that no other channel has gone. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, a half-dollar-sized battery-powered implant, is not just a heart monitoring device. In 2026, it is a data-generating, signal-transmitting, time-stamped witness to everything that happened to her body on the night of February 1st. At 2:28 a.m., the Pacemaker app disconnected from her iPhone. But here's the critical distinction that Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed, and almost nobody reported properly. The pacemaker itself never stopped. The device continued functioning normally inside Nancy's body. What stopped was the remote transmission to the monitoring clinic, meaning either the phone lost power, was turned off, moved out of Bluetooth range, or was deliberately disconnected by someone who knew that Pacemaker app was broadcasting Nancy's location and cardiac data to the outside world. First question for you right now. Someone or something disconnected Nancy's pacemaker at exactly 2:28 a.m. Do you think that was deliberate? Someone who knew about the app and intentionally stopped it? Or a coincidence? Drop your answer in the comments. February 1st, March 11th, 2026, Tucson, Arizona, and the skies above. Here is the complete 41-minute timeline and the explosive new details buried inside each timestamp that mainstream media has barely scratched. At 1:47 a.m., the camera goes dark. The Nest doorbell camera disconnects. The neighborhood internet begins experiencing widespread outages that multiple residents will later confirm to FBI agents going door to door. The masked suspect, already captured in the recovered footage, has neutralized the camera directly, or the Wi-Fi disruption has done it for him. Either way, the result is the same. Nancy Guthrie's home has just gone completely dark to the outside world. between 1:47 a.m. and 2:12 a.m., 25 minutes of unrecorded activity. This is the window. This is where it happened. And this is the window that Ted Williams said is uncharacteristic of every category of crime except one, a planned, controlled, deliberate operation by people who were intimately familiar with that home, that security system, and that woman's daily routine. 25 minutes, inside a house with no cameras, no signals, and an 84-year-old woman who could not walk 50 yards by herself. 2:28 a.m. Motion detected. The surveillance software fires. Something moved outside Nancy's front door. No video, no footage, just a timestamp confirming that something moved. Former Washington, D.C. homicide detective Ted Williams said this detail is the one that keeps him awake. A standard home burglary takes 8 to 12 minutes. A grab-and-go abduction takes even less. So what was happening inside that house for 25 full minutes before even the motion detector fired? Williams